I have a story of Mark Andreas. It happens to him 4 times. Let's begin. Part 1.
Home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a safe haven from the world. But for me, it was the battlefield. The shouting was a constant soundtrack. The slammed doors, a percussive beat to a song of anger I couldn't escape. Every night, the air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I spent years dreaming of an exit. Any exit, a door that opened to silence, to a peace, to a place that was just mine. When I finally saved up enough to leave, I didn't look back. I just needed out. The city was a sprawling beast of concrete and glass, and I was just another anonymous soul trying to find a corner to call my own. My search for an apartment was bleak. Everything was either outrageously expensive or completely dilapidated. Then, I found it. Online, it looked too good to be true. A 1-bedroom in an old but charming building, listed for a price that felt like a typo. It was suspiciously cheap. A fact my brain registered but my desperation chose to ignore. The landlord was an old, weary-looking man who barely made eye contact. He mumbled something about the previous tenant leaving in a hurry, handed me a rusty set of keys, and that was it. The place was mine. The apartment itself had the character. High ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked with history, and a long, narrow hallway that connected the living room to the bedroom. It was sparse, furnished only with what little I'd brought with me, but it was quiet. The silence was so profound it almost hummed. For the first few days, it was bliss. I slept more soundly than I had in years, free from the nightly war of words I'd grown up with. I was finally building my own sanctuary. I started to unpack, to arrange my few belongings, to let myself believe that I had made it. Primera, ese safe. The first sign that something was wrong was small, easy to dismiss. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the light bulb above me flickered violently. 10 went out. I figured it was just old wiring. I replaced the bulb, and it seemed fine. But then other things started happening. I'd leave the bedroom door closed, only to find it wide open when I came back from the living room. I'd place my keys on the small table by the entrance, and later find them on the kitchen counter. I told myself I was just forgetful, stressed from the move. My mind was playing tricks on me, creating new anxieties to replace the old ones. It had to be. One night, I was jolted awake by a sound. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. The sound of footsteps, a slow, deliberate pacing coming from the hallway. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. My heart hammered against my ribs. I strained my ears, listening in the suffocating darkness. The building was old, I reasoned. It was probably just my upstairs neighbor. I pulled the covers tighter around me, squeezed my eyes shut, and waited for the sound to stop. It eventually did, fading into the oppressive silence of the apartment. I didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. The incidents grew more frequent, more undeniable. The flickering lights became a nightly occurrence. Doors didn't just open, they would creak slowly, as if pushed by an unseen hand. The pacing in the hallway was no longer just a nighttime disturbance. I'd hear it during the day, a constant, restless patrol just outside my field of vision. I started keeping the lights on, even when I slept, hoping to ward off whatever was sharing my space. But the light only seemed to make the shadows dance more erratically. I began to feel a presence, a constant, prickling sensation of being watched. It was heaviest in the hallway. That long, narrow stretch of wood and plaster felt like a throat, and I was being slowly swallowed every time I had to walk down it. I would hurry through, my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look into the dark corners. The air there felt colder, heavier. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I'd see a flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows, a shape that was too tall, too thin, too fast to be a trick of the light. Whenever I'd whip my head around, there was nothing there, just the empty, silent hall. My sanctuary had become my prison. The quiet I once craved was now filled with a terrifying anticipation. I was constantly on edge, my body coiled like a spring. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares that bled into my waking hours. I saw a figure in my dreams, a tall, gaunt silhouette with no face, just a void. It would stand at the end of the hallway, watching me. I started to see it when I was awake. A fleeting glimpse in the reflection of the TV screen. A dark form standing behind me. A distortion in the air at the far end of the hall, like heat rising from asphalt, but cold. One evening, I was sitting on the floor of my living room, eating a sad meal out of a cardboard box, when all the lights in the apartment went out at once. Total, absolute darkness. My breath hitched in my throat. I fumbled for my phone, its small screen a pathetic beacon against the oppressive black, and then I heard it. The pacing. It wasn't in the hallway this time. It was in the living room with me. Slow, deliberate steps, circling the perimeter of the room. Primera wa. It's a frozen phone clutched in my hand, listening as the unseen presence got closer and closer. I could feel the air shift as it passed by me. A wave of cold so intense, it felt like it was leaching the warmth from my skin. A faint, musty smell, like damp earth in decay, filled my nostrils. I didn't dare breathe. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. I knew, without seeing anything, that it was there, looming over me in the darkness. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed by a terror, so pure, so primal. It felt like my heart was going to explode. I don't know how long I sat there, trapped in that terrifying standoff. It could have been seconds or hours. Then, as suddenly as they went out, the lights flickered back on, and there was nothing there. The room was empty. The cold was gone. The smell had vanished. Primera, das salón. But I knew I wasn't. It was just choosing not to be seen. It was toying with me, showing me how utterly powerless I was. The escape I had fought so hard for had led me to a new kind of hell. I had run from the loud, visible monsters of my childhood, only to be cornered by a silent, invisible one. My old home was a cage of noise and anger. But this place was a cage of fear and darkness. I was trapped. I couldn't go back to my family, and I couldn't stay here. As I sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably, a horrifying realization washed over me. The whispering I sometimes thought I heard, the faint, guttural sounds from the end of the hall. It wasn't just a random noise. It was a voice, and I was beginning to understand what it was saying. It was welcoming me home. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, that it was never going to let me leave. My escape was just an illusion. I had only traded one broken home for another.
What ended last night was only the beginning. Now, we dive into part 2.
Things are not meant to be seen. Some moments in our lives force us to question what we know about reality itself. What you're about to hear is not fiction. This is a story about the night. Something reached out from the darkness and made itself known. So turn off the lights, close your door, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. This is part 2. The hands in the doorway. A few months had passed since the first incident. Life had returned to normal, at least that's what I kept telling myself. I went out one evening with friends, the usual routine. Drinks, laughter, trying to forget the things that haunted the corners of my mind. That's when I ran into her. I'll call her Sammy. We knew each other from school. We'd talked a few times before, nothing serious. But that night, we connected. We laughed, we drank. And when the bar closed, I invited her back to my place. She agreed. We weren't planning anything serious. Just continuing the conversation. Watching a movie, sharing a few more drinks. She made it clear early on she didn't want to take things further. And I respected that. We moved to the bedroom to finish the movie. The couch wasn't comfortable, and the bed was big enough for both of us to keep our distance. Eventually, we both passed out. Sometime later, I woke up. It was still the middle of the night. The apartment was dark. Silent. But something wasn't right. I heard footsteps soft, deliberate, moving down the hallway. My eyes snapped open. I looked beside me. Sammy was gone. I sat up slowly, listening. The footsteps continued light, careful. Like someone trying not to be heard. I crept out of bed and peeked down the hallway. There she was, in the living room, quietly grabbing her things from the couch. Her jacket, her phone, moving as silently as possible. She was clearly trying to avoid the awkward morning goodbye. I understood, so I didn't say anything. I watched her walk toward the front door. She paused for a moment and opened it, and slipped out into the night. I heard the door close. Click. Just to be sure, I called out her name. No response. She was gone. I sighed, rubbed my eyes, and went back to bed. I fell asleep almost immediately. About an hour later, I woke up again. This time, it was different. A loud noise. Bang. My heart exploded in my chest. My entire body went rigid. I called out her name. Sammy. No response. I was scared to move. Scared to even breathe. My mind was racing. Had she come back? Did she forget something? But why didn't she answer? I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I texted her. Are you still in my apartment? I knew it was weird. I knew it sounded paranoid, but I was genuinely afraid. I stared at my phone, waiting for a response. The screen glowed in the darkness. Nothing. That's when I looked up. My bedroom door was still open, just slightly ajar. And that's when I saw it. Something wrapped around the door frame. My breathing stopped. My chest tightened. I couldn't move. I swiped down on my phone with trembling fingers and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness. And there they were. 2 hands wrapped tightly around the door frame, fingers pale, long, gripping the wood with unnatural strength. The moment the light hit them, the hands tightened. The fingers pressed harder into the wood. And then they pulled back. Slowly, deliberately. Out of sight. The scream I'd been holding in exploded out of me. Get out. Get out. Get out! I screamed it over and over. My voice cracked. My throat burned. I was frozen in my bed, clutching my phone like a lifeline. But there was no response. No footsteps, no movement. Just silence. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. I don't know. Finally, I worked up the courage to leave the bed. My legs were shaking. My entire body was drenched in cold sweat. I stepped into the hallway. It was empty. I turned on every light in the apartment. The hallway. The living room. The kitchen. The bathroom. I checked the closets. I looked behind the shower curtain. I even checked under the bed. No one was there. But the strangest part, I never heard the front door open. I never heard it close. Whatever had been in my apartment was never invited in, and it never left. I called Sammy. My hands were still shaking as I held the phone to my ear. She answered, sounding groggy and confused. What's wrong? I asked her if she'd come back to my apartment. C'est Saïd? No, she told me she'd left a long time ago because she couldn't sleep. She'd been home for over an hour. I hung up. Then I called my best friend. He answered on the 3rd ring, annoyed that I'd woken him up. I told him everything. The footsteps. The hands. The way they pulled back into the darkness. La, le. Dude, you're still drunk. You're sleep deprived. It was probably a hallucination. And honestly, it made sense. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Until the next morning, the sun was up. The apartment was bright. Everything seemed normal. But I couldn't shake the image of those hands. I walked back to my bedroom. I stood in the doorway, and I examined the door frame. And there they were. Fingerprints. Exactly where I saw the hands. 5 on the left side of the frame, 5 on the right. Clear. Defined. Unmistakable. I took a photo. I still have it saved in my I moved out. as soon as my lease ended. I never told anyone else what happened, but sometimes, late at night, I still see them. Those hands wrapped around my door frame, waiting, watching. And I know they're still out there, somewhere.
What you feared in part 2 was still not the truth. Now it begins. Part 3.
Felt that unsettling chill, that prickling on your skin when you rail me alone, that feeling that you're not really alone. This story might make you double check your locks tonight. It happened to a friend of mine. Let's call him Alex. He lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever really happens, until it did. One Tuesday night, Alex was home alone. His parents were out of town for the week, and he had the whole house to himself. He was upstairs in his bedroom, binge-watching some new sci-fi show on his laptop. It was getting late, maybe around 11. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the fridge downstairs and the muffled dialogue from his headphones. He was just getting to a crucial plot point when his phone, sitting on the nightstand, buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Usually, he'd ignore it, let it go to voicemail. But for some reason, a strange curiosity took over. He paused his show, pulled off his headphones, and answered. Hello, he said, his voice a little hoarse from not speaking for hours. There was silence on the other end, just a faint, staticky hiss. Hello? Is anyone there? Still, nothing. He was about to hang up, annoyed at the prank call, when he heard it. A sound, faint but clear, coming from downstairs. It was a voice, and it was coming from the living room TV. He froze, phone still pressed to his ear. The voice from the TV was tinny and distant, but it was saying something. He strained to listen. Then, through the phone, a voice spoke. It was distorted, like it was being passed through a cheap voice changer, and it sent a shiver down his spine. The voice said, "Did you hear that?" Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. The voice on the phone was perfectly synchronized with the voice coming from the downstairs TV. It was the same distorted, electronic rasp. A cold dread washed over him. Someone was in his house, and they were watching him. "Who is this?" Alex whispered into the phone, his own voice barely audible. The distorted voice chuckled, a dry, crackling sound that seemed to snake its way up the stairs. "I'm watching your show," it said. Alex's blood ran cold. He hadn't told anyone what he was watching. The TV downstairs was supposed to be off. How could they know? He slowly, silently, got off his bed and crept towards his bedroom door. His phone still glued to his ear. He had to see. He had to know what was happening. As he reached his door, he could hear the audio from the downstairs TV more clearly. It wasn't his sci-fi show. It was a news report. A local news channel. Then the voice on the phone spoke again, its tone dripping with a twisted amusement. "They're talking about a break-in just a few blocks from here. Crazy, right? You should be careful." Alex's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He felt a wave of nausea. This couldn't be real. It was a dream, a nightmare. He slowly turned the knob, wincing at the soft click it made. He peeked through the crack. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the faint, flickering blue light from the living room at the bottom of the stairs. He could see the TV screen. It was indeed playing the local news, but there was no one in the living room. The couch was empty. The chairs were empty. The room was still. Where was the person? Then, his eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw it. A shadow. It was standing at the foot of the staircase. A tall, slender figure, completely motionless, cloaked in the darkness. Alex couldn't make out any features, just a dark silhouette against the TV's glow. His breath hitched in his throat. He wanted to scream, to slam the door shut, but he was paralyzed by fear. The figure just stood there, watching the stairs, watching his door. Then, through the phone, the distorted voice whispered, its words a cold caress of terror. "I see you." That broke the spell. Alex slammed the door shut and fumbled with the lock, his fingers clumsy with panic. The click of the lock echoed in the sudden silence. He backed away from the door, his heart feeling like it was going to explode. He could hear his own ragged breathing. The phone was still in his hand, the line still open. There was no more sound from the caller, just that same unnerving static. Downstairs, the TV clicked off. The house plunged back into complete, suffocating silence. Then he heard it, a soft, scraping sound. It was coming from his door. Someone was trying to handle. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. It was slow, deliberate. They knew he was in there. They were testing the lock. Alex scrambled backward until his back hit the far wall. His eyes glued to the doorknob. It twisted back and forth, relentlessly. He held his breath, praying the old lock would hold. Then he heard footsteps, not the slow, deliberate ones from before. These were hurried, almost frantic. They were moving away from his door, down the stairs. He heard the front door open and then slam shut. And then silence. A deafening, absolute silence. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. Too scared to move. Too scared to even breathe. Was it a trick? Were they waiting for him to come out? Finally, his survival instinct kicked in. He ended the terrifying call and dialed 911, his voice shaking as he explained what had happened. The police arrived within minutes, their presence a small comfort in the terrifying emptiness of the house. They swept the property, checking every room, every closet, every dark corner. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. The front door had been unlocked, which was strange since Alex was sure he'd locked it earlier. The officers were professional, but a little skeptical. A prank call that got out of hand, maybe. But then they traced the number, and that's when the story took its final, chilling turn. Tikaladen T. Come from a burner phone or a spoofed number. It had been traced to a cell phone belonging to a guy from Alex's school. Let's call him Mark. Alex knew him, but not well. They had a few classes together, but they weren't friends. He was a quiet, awkward kid who mostly kept to himself. Why would he do something so twisted? When the police questioned Mark, he had a rock-solid alibi. He was at a movie with his family at the exact time of the call. He even had the ticket stubs to prove it. He claimed his phone had been stolen earlier that day at school. He had reported it, but the police hadn't found it yet. So, the case hit a dead end. The police filed the report, but with no suspect and no evidence left at the scene, there was nothing more they could do. So the mystery remains. Was it Mark? Did he somehow orchestrate this terrifyingly elaborate and cruel prank, faking his alibi in the stolen phone? Or was it something far more random and sinister? Did a real burglar steal Mark's phone, see Alex's family was away on social media, and decide to play a horrifying game before they robbed the place, only to be scared off when Alex locked himself in? Alex never found out. He moved out a few months later, unable to shake the feeling of being watched in that house. He still jumps every time an unknown number calls, and sometimes, late at night, he swears he can still hear that distorted, electronic voice whispering in the dark. I see you. What do you think happened? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Stay safe, and always, always lock your doors. Thanks for watching.
It's too late to run. What has been awakened will never sleep. This is the end.
There are places in this world that hold darkness, not because of what happened there, but because of what still lingers. Basements are strange places. Cold, forgotten, buried beneath the rest of the house. And sometimes they hide things. Things that wait. Things that watch. What you're about to hear is a story about a night that should have been ordinary. A night among friends. A night of laughter and rest. But in the darkness of that basement, something else was waiting. So listen closely. And remember, not every corner is empty. This is part 4. The basement. Years later, after everything that had happened before, I thought I'd finally moved past it all. The strange encounters, the unexplained moments, the fear. I convinced myself it was all just coincidence. Bad luck, nothing more. One night, I went out with friends. We hit a few bars, had some drinks. laughed until our sides hurt. It was a good night. By the time we left, I was tired. Too tired to drive home. My friend Cody offered to let me crash at his place. "You can take the basement couch," he said. "It's comfortable. You'll be fine." I've been to Cody's house plenty of times before. I knew the layout, knew the family, knew the basement. It was unfinished, but clean. A couch, a TV, some storage boxes in the corners. Nothing unusual. I thanked him, stumbled downstairs, and collapsed onto the couch. Within minutes, I was out. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up in the dark. The basement was pitch black. No light from the TV. No light from upstairs. Just darkness. My mouth was dry. My head was pounding. I was thirsty. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. And that's when I saw it. A black mass in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just a pile of clothes or a shadow cast by something upstairs. But then I realized it was moving, not swaying, not drifting. It was shifting deliberately. It was a person. My entire body went cold. My heart started racing. Someone was in the basement with me. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stared. The figure stood completely still now, like it was waiting, watching. I had to get out, but I couldn't let them know I'd seen them. If I panicked, if I ran, they'd know. So I pretended. "Primera fa." I yawned, stretched my arms, mumbled something under my breath about being thirsty. I played it off, like I hadn't noticed a thing. Then, slowly, I stood up. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. I walked toward the stairs, slowly, casually, like nothing was wrong. But my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I put my hand on the railing, and I started climbing. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Halfway up, I glanced back. The figure was now at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me, wearing a black mask. I froze. Our eyes locked. Or, at least, I thought they did. I couldn't see their face. Just the mask. Blank. Emotionless. Watching me, I ran. I bolted up the stairs. My feet pounded against the wood. My breath came in ragged gasps. I reached the top, grabbed the door handle, yanked it open, and I slammed the door behind me. I stood there, panting, pressing my back against the door. My whole body was trembling. Cody's dad heard the noise. He came downstairs from his bedroom, looking confused and half asleep. "What's going on?" I told him. Someone was in the basement. Someone was wearing a mask. Someone was watching me. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight, told me to stay upstairs, and he went down. I stood at the top of the stairs, listening. I heard his footsteps. I heard him moving boxers. I heard him opening the closet door. Then he came back up. There's no one down there. But his face didn't look convinced. He walked to the back door, and he froze. The door was open, not just unlocked. Open. Someone had been inside, and they'd left. Cody's dad called the cops immediately. They arrived within minutes, searched the house, searched the yard, took statements, but there was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. Whoever it was had vanished. I never slept in that basement again. I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, I saw that figure standing in the corner, watching, waiting. Cody and his family moved out a few years later, not because of what happened. At least, that's what they said. But I always wondered, did they feel it too? That presence? That weight? That feeling of being watched? To this day, I still think about that corner. The way the figure stood there, perfectly still, blending into the darkness. How long had they been there? Were they already in the basement when I arrived? Or did they come in while I was sleeping? And what would have happened if I hadn't woken up? Would they have just stood there, watching me sleep? Or would they have done something else? I've been in a lot of basements since then. Friends' houses, apartments, storage units. And every single time, I check the corners. Every single time, I turn on all the lights. Because I know what can hide in the dark. I know what waits. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about it. I'm back on that couch in that basement. And I see the figure standing in the corner, wearing that black mask. And in the dream, I try to run, but my legs won't move. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. And the figure starts walking toward me. Slow, deliberate. Step, step, step. And just before it reaches me, I wake up. I don't know who was in that basement. I don't know why they were there. But I know they were real. And I know they saw me, just like I saw them. And somewhere out there, they still remember that corner, that mask, that night. And so do I, every single night.